Welcome to another episode of Invigorate Your Business with George Stroumboulis. Today's episode comes from Athens, Greece. Today, I get to sit down with Peter Economides. He is a marketing and branding genius and behind some of the most iconic advertising campaigns for Apple, Coca-Cola, Heineken, and so much more. He has also gone viral over the last years about talking about Greece and shifting mindsets here. Truly impressive stuff. This episode is packed with so much information, so much advice and insight into strategy, marketing, branding across all cultures, industries, and everything. Peter is truly a legend in this space, and I'm personally excited to be able to have this conversation with him, and I know you're gonna enjoy this at home. So enjoy this episode starting now. My name is George Stroumboulis, and I'm extremely passionate about traveling the world, meeting new people, and learning about new businesses. Join me as I sit down with other entrepreneurs to learn about their journeys. This episode of Invigorate Your Business starts now. So we are in Peter's Athens, Greece.
Yes.
Right? When I started the show, I had a list of people I wanted to sit down with. You were at the top of the list, and this was over 2 years ago. It took 2 years chasing you, but I had to chain you down here, and you're sitting today. And here we are today. We're sitting in Malaka, Athens, Greece, with the legendary, iconic, mastermind, creative Peter Economides. Thank you for sitting down with me.
Thank you very much for having me. It's nice to see you.
I appreciate that. I feel like the amount of times we've hung out, we've had dinners or coffees over the years, there was so much knowledge in there. Like that would just be amazing content to share with the world. Anytime I sit down with you, I'm always challenged. Like I'm always sitting there creatively. I'm like, okay, how can I apply this? What about this? And it could be with just random shit that'll come up and we'll be talking about the cheese at the table and what about this and the wine. So you're obviously nonstop, just a creative genius, right? Like that's your DNA. Your background, we're going to talk about it. Anyone that's listening and has a Greek attachment knows of your name. But high level, Peter Economides is a creative mastermind, right? You've worked with the biggest ad agencies in the world. You were on Madison Avenue, making shit happen there, like just impressive. Part of the team behind the Think Different campaign with Apple, working with McCann-Erickson, TBWA, has lived around the world, awards. I came into knowing who you are when my brother-in-law in Canada shared a link 2010-11 of the whole rebranding Greece.
Yeah.
When Greece was in the middle of that. And when I saw that, I'm like, fuck, this guy just had this courage in the balls and was just saying exactly what we couldn't articulate. So that was the first time I'm like, who is this guy? Right? And then you start searching for. So that's, I'm sure everyone saw that for the first time. So just talk to me in general on that. Was that where people really started knowing your name?
Yeah. Before that, my name had not really broken out into the general consciousness. That was back in 2011. I was asked to give a talk on rebranding Greece. And I remember saying to myself, I used a phrase during that presentation. I said, Greece is the best brand that's never been branded. Okay. And I think that's so true. Because what I've become very conscious of over the years is that Greeks are self-denigrating. They talk about Greece as though Greece can't do it. Okay. And yet I come from a background where Greeks are doers. Right? Talking about the diaspora.
Absolutely.
Wherever you go around the world, there are Greeks who are doing it and they've done it, right? Except in Greece, you don't get that mindset. And I said to this audience, I said that rebranding Greece is actually about rebranding Greeks, which goes back to my fundamental belief about branding, by the way, that it's all about the ethos that you've got. It's not about what you say about yourself. It's what you express about who you are. Okay. And that's really what I was talking about during that talk. And that thing just went viral. It was nuts.
Viral, yeah.
It was nuts.
Were you expecting it? Like, what was the feedback?
The feedback during the talk was great, right? But a week later, I get a mail from Greek Reporter in the States.
Yep.
Saying to me that I've been named as one of the 10 most influential Greeks in the world. I'm like, what? I mean, that wasn't my game.
Yeah.
That wasn't my game.
Who were you speaking to at that event?
I was speaking to a bunch of businessmen, marketing professionals. It was that kind of audience.
Yeah.
The typical audience that I would speak to.
Right.
And they put this thing up on YouTube and it just went boom.
Boom, yeah. And I
Boom.
think what resonated internationally was what you said, not comparing us versus them, but the Greeks outside versus inside. All those messages were like, oh my God, that makes so much sense.
Yes. But I managed to communicate that during that particular talk without talking about how successful the diaspora is.
Yeah.
Right? But I addressed the real issue here, which is that if you want to rebrand this country, we got to make sure, first of all, that we love this country and we express that love.
Yes.
In order to be able to project that outside. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
So when you gave that talk, started going viral, where were you at your career then? Like where did that catapult you? And then we'll go backwards to your career.
My career, that didn't catapult my career. What that did was that really catapulted my influence within broader society. That's what happened there. Because following that, I gave a talk a couple of months later, a direct follow-up to that. I gave a talk where I spoke about the most popular word in the Greek language, which is, of course, the word Malaka. And the second most popular is the Ginetai, and then we combine them together, the Ginetai Malaka. And I spoke about the need to get rid of the then word and stay with the Ginetai. And I remind you, it was the height of the crisis.
And for the listeners who don't speak Greek.
Yes. Let me explain that. Malaka is the most common expression in this country. It's I guess the best translation would be wanker. Yeah. We call each other Malaka, which means you're a wanker. But we say it in a nice way and in a bad way. Depends on the tone of voice that you go when you use that word. You say, "Nare Malaka." Or you can say, "Yasure Malaka."
So many meanings to it.
Exactly. And we use it all the time, right? Then Ginetai means it can't be done. Ginetai means it can be done. The then word is the negative word.
Yep.
So I said we need to get rid of the then and stay with the Ginetai because it can be done. And I added to that, if we can't do it, we're in deep shit because it was the height of the crisis.
Absolutely.
And I think that resonated incredibly well, particularly with a younger generation. Because what I've seen over the years is an incredible switch in mindset. I get young people, young Greeks coming up to me and thanking me for giving them that talk, which amazes me. But I've really seen the shift in mindset.
Could I comment on that? When I was 19, I did an internship in Corfu with the European Union Business Center. And my dream, at the time was, Madison Avenue, I'm intrigued by it. Yeah. I would read Saatchi and Saatchi and Ogilvy, and I really love that space and the creative side of it. So I pursued more, entrepreneurial startup type world. So when I first came across your content, I was like, this guy's a fucking rock star. To me, someone who thinks they're creative and loves that space. And then I remember after seeing the video, I saw you in New York where you were basically launching this whole Ginetai. And I remember being in the room in New York. Yeah. And I remember I came up with my wife at the time. I think she was my girlfriend. This was 20...
That must have been 2012, 2013.
Yeah. So it was my girlfriend at the time. And I'm like, I want to go shake his hand. And it was like I was meeting, for me, like a Michael Jordan of the time.
Amazing.
And I remember when I came up and you were just so cool, right? You were just so nice. And then ever since then, anytime we talk, and I don't try to abuse, time or whatever, but Pete, gonna be in Athens. You have time? Maybe, absolutely. Let's grab a dinner. And that first dinner I went to, I was just blown away. It was like a few hours of just creative conversation. So, and then, sorry, where I was going with this, the Greece aspect, right? Even for myself coming to Greece now and wanting to have a foot here and working with people, you definitely had an influence on even what I'm doing right now today.
That's amazing. I'm really happy to hear that.
100%. But it's a big deal. Yeah. And you ignited that, and it wasn't just someone here. It was like, wow, and this guy has done this on a global scale and has affected and influenced people buying stuff. Again, I sound like a fanboy right now, but I just want you to know, it's been...
Thank you.
It's been a big deal.
Thank you.
So the Ginetai happens. Talk about the positive aspect and then just the backlash from the typical, the Ginetai of Toso Malakas. I'm sure there was negative.
I'm a great believer in the innovation curve, right? The adoption of innovations. And I know who was reacting to what I was talking about. The guys at the beginning of the curve, the guys who get it, okay? There's always the tail end who are not going to get it.
Yep.
Okay? So there was a lot of backlash. from people who just don't believe that it can be done.
Right.
Well, forget about them. You're not going to change their minds. But I think that what has happened in this country, and it's really important, is that the guys who can make a difference and show the way forward to others, they have changed. They have changed. You know, something really significant is that 20 years ago in this country, if you asked a young kid, what he wanted to be when he grew up, he'd say to you, I want a good job in the public service. It was to work for a couple of years and retire. As simple as that.
Seduxy retirement was their ultimate goal, yeah.
It's not like that anymore.
Right.
And that's significant.
Did you see recently that Greece, I think there was 800,000 to 1 million youth that left during the crisis, right? I just read, I think it was last week, there's a brain gain now. The opposite effect. And again, it's a few thousand people coming back, but that's what it takes.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You know what's happened is that Athens has become one of the world's favorite destinations, but more than that, it's also becoming one of the world's favorite habitats. People want to live here.
Right.
I got friends who've been coming to Greece for years, and they come here these days, and they say to me, you're so lucky to be living here. I wish I was living here. And they're living in amazing places around the world.
Right. Was that, so your first time coming to Greece was in the 80s. So we're going to come back to this.
Yeah.
Talk to me career-wise, right? So you're South African, born and raised in Johannesburg?
Correct.
Right? So talk to me about just that path.
Okay. So third generation South African. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be an architect. That was my passion. I'm still passionate about architecture. And my dad had other thoughts. My dad wanted me to take over his business. He was a very successful entrepreneurial character, very successful. And I did a business degree at the University of Cape Town. And one of my favorite subjects was marketing. And I worked with my father for a short while. And one day I said to him, Dad, this is not what I want to do. He said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a big deal on Madison Avenue. He says to me, where the hell is that? So I explained it to him, and he looked at me, and I shall never forget this. He looked at me with a huge smile on his face, and he said, go and show them who we are.
Jeez.
Which was phenomenal.
How old were you at this age?
I was, let me think about this. I was 22.
Come on.
Yeah. He said, go and show them who we are, okay? With a huge smile on his face. And I've written about this. It's in fact in a book which Andy Manatos wrote called The Extraordinary Greeks. And there's a piece which I wrote, which is inside there, where I talk about the fact that I was on my own, but I was never truly on my own. I knew that my father was with me. And that was phenomenal.
That's phenomenal.
It was really amazing. He achieved that.
But just on that point, people don't realize, unless you have that, just imagine saying, you know what, I'm going to do it, and you didn't have the support of your loved ones or your parents. You'd be different.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I'm sure you went there.
Absolutely. And I'll never forget, on that point, I was in Hong Kong, and a friend of my father's came to Hong Kong. He was there on business, and we went out for dinner together. And over dinner, he said to me, your father needs you. You should go back to South Africa and help your father. And I said, no. My father and I have got the kind of relationship where if my father needs me, he will tell me. And I really knew that.
That's powerful.
That was very powerful.
That's powerful.
I said to him, no. Whereas if I didn't have that relationship with my father, I might have done it.
Yeah.
I might have done it.
You didn't have that security, right? Yeah.
Very, very important. So just to pick up on the story then. So I joined McCann-Erickson in South Africa because I figured this was the way to get to Madison Avenue, was to join a big multinational American-based ad group.
And sorry, for the listeners at that point who don't understand the advertising world, it's the equivalent of if you wanted to get an IT to go work for a Google. Or,
exactly. McCann-Erickson was the world's biggest, the world's most globally spread. Accounts like Coca-Cola, Nestle, Unilever, it was
massive.
Gillette, it was it. Okay. Yep. So I joined McCann-Erickson, worked there for a couple of years in Johannesburg. And then they offered me a job in Hong Kong, okay, as a regional coordinator, which I grabbed. And I went to live in Hong Kong. And I was there for 2 years when I got this call from somebody at head office in New York. And he says to me, you're Greek, aren't you? I said, yep. He said, you speak Greek? I lied, and I said, yes, fluently. And they sent me, to Greece as the CEO.
Zero imposter syndrome right there.
And I was a very young CEO. I mean, I was like in my late 20s when I came here. And I learned Greek.
That's huge.
I learned Greek. I remember ordering one day a window shutter salad, badzuria instead of badzaria. Badzari means beetroot, and badzuri means window shutter.
The window shutter.
Yeah. So I ordered a window shutter salad.
Minor details, right?
Yes. Worked here in Greece for about 6 years, I guess, 8 years, 7 years, something like that, and did some wonderful stuff. We did this piece of advertising for Campari, which was the first time that Greece won a prize in Cannes, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it won a major award at the Cannes Advertising Festival.
This is in the 80s now.
This was in the 80s.
Okay.
And I must tell you about this ad because it's one of my favorite pieces of creative ever.
Before you tell us, can we put it up on the video while you're talking about this? Can we
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. It should be somewhere.
Okay.
I'll look for it and I'll find
Yep.
it. So what it was all about was this. The distributor of Campari in Greece had a meeting with me and he says to me, every home has got a bottle of Campari, but people don't drink it because they don't really like the taste. And the color's a little weird. It's bright red.
Yes.
He said, I'd like you please to promote for me Campari with orange juice. So I said, that's not a good idea. He says, why not? I said, because before you know it, people will be drinking vodka with orange juice. You're going to get used to them drinking alcohol mixed with orange juice. Not a good idea. You'll lose your characteristic bad taste.
Jeez.
And you'll lose your characteristic bad color. He says, well, what do you think I should do? So I said, I'll get back to you. And we put a lot of thought behind this. And we went back with an idea, which was a black and white commercial with incredible sense of style to it. Okay. Where just the product was red. And what it said was, the more you drink it, the more you like it. Because there's only one Campari.
Wow. Jeez.
It was bold.
That was bold, yes.
It was bold. And the client loved it.
Wow.
He loved it. So we put that on air and Campari became firmly established as one of the leading drinks in this market. It was phenomenal.
So from that brilliant campaign, you could see the sales after that backs it up and supports it.
Oh, absolutely.
So you may have laid the way for like Ursus. Remember, Ursus was red.
Yeah. It was amazing.
That's incredible.
It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. And this client was amazing. I remember he said to me, I said, I'd like to show you the story. But he says, no, go and make the movie. I'll look at it when you're ready. And I went and I actually made the commercial. He allowed me to take the risk. Wow. It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So that was in the 80s. What other type of campaigns in the 80s were?
Oh, we did it. I'm trying to think of all the work we did. Campari is the one that really, really sticks out in my head. But there was tons of stuff. I mean, we were running the Coca-Cola business here.
Right.
Lots of work for Nestle.
So just on the Campari, how does that process even work at the time? You're the CEO in this region, right? You're working with the creative team. They're coming back. So everything comes through you, the visuals, everything. Like, how does that process
work? Well,
it
depends. It depends on who you are and what your experience is and where your skill set is. Okay. My skill set was always strategy, but strategy interpreted into a powerful idea. That's what I've always been focused on.
Okay.
Okay. That's always been my focus. So I was very much a CEO driven, not into running the company, but in helping the company to do the best at what it could do. And my contribution was always strategy, but strategy culminating in a powerful idea.
Yeah. From my experience with you, even talking about my business over these dinners and everything, you do the Socratic approach, right? Like, I know nothing. Let's start from scratch.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
100%.
Has it always been like that?
No. I'll tell you where I learned that. In Hong Kong.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. I arrived in Hong Kong as what I thought I was. Smart, young South African kid who'd done well at McCann-Erickson in Johannesburg. Therefore, he'd been transferred to Hong Kong as a regional account coordinator. Okay? But what I realized was that I knew nothing because I was surrounded by a culture which I didn't understand.
Right.
You know, you present work to a Chinese and he's nodding his head with a smile on his face, but he's actually saying, I hate it.
Yeah.
But if you can't see that, you're going to make huge mistakes. Right? And then when you get down to working on advertising in that kind of culture, you've got to be thinking fresh. You have to. You can't assume anything. And that's where I learned the power of ignorance. And I always say to myself, the only thing you know is what you know. Nothing more than that.
That's powerful.
Nothing more than that. Ignorance.
So did you get burned going in there in the beginning? And that's how you were learning?
I felt I was about to get burnt.
Okay.
Which is why I very quickly stepped back and realized.
Self-aware. Wow, that's incredible.
I realized I was about to get burnt.
Yeah. So then you're climbing this career. Athens, you have this you're winning the Oscars of the ad world, right? You're winning these awards. They scoop you up and take you to New York?
To Mexico.
To Mexico. Okay, so Mexico City.
So Mexico City was the next move. Very large McCann-Erickson office, the second largest in the world.
Were they servicing all of Latin South America?
No. Mexico was focused on Mexico, which is a very big market.
Yep.
But I was appointed at the same time senior vice president for Latin America, right? Working together with the guy who was running the whole of Latin America.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So he was based in Brazil, and his job was to run Latin America. But I was appointed as a senior vice president for the region at the same time. Spent 6 years there.
6 years.
Yeah. Was it 6? No less than that. I spent 4 years there. And then I moved to Madison Avenue, which is where I wanted to be.
Now, where are you age-wise?
Let me think about this. I moved there, I was 40.
40, okay. And relationship-wise, all these moves, like were you...
You mean personal relationship?
Personal, yeah, personal.
I was with my second wife. I've been married twice.
Twice, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like with all that travel,
I met my first wife in South Africa. She came with me to Hong Kong. We came together to Greece. We separated in Greece. I met my second wife while I was here, but she was from South Africa. She was visiting. And we went together to Mexico and New York, and we separated in New York, and she lives in New York now. And I'm back here.
Okay. I mean, that's not, listen, for anyone moving that many cultures and lifestyle, that's hard for two people at the same time
It is.
right?
It is.
Got to be hard.
It is.
You make it to Madison Avenue. Really quick though, Mexico, right? There's a crazy story about Mexico, right? You were kidnapped.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Talk to us about that, because that's just an insane...
I was kidnapped by the Mexican police, believe it or not.
It seems very believable with all the stories I hear, actually.
What happened was that one of our clients in Mexico was General Motors. And having General Motors as a client, my personal car was Cadillac, which is not a good idea in Mexico City.
Drug dealer status, right?
Drug dealer status. And of course, I had a driver who was also a bodyguard, right? Because you need it. And I was out at a client dinner one night on the other side of the city from where I lived. And I said to my driver, you go home, because he lived on that side of the city. And I said, I'll drive myself back. He says, are you sure, senor? I said, don't worry. And I drove back home, and I did what you do in Mexico City late at night. You don't stop at red traffic lights. Okay. And I went through a red traffic light, and all of a sudden a police car pulled me over, and I wind down my window, and I gave the policeman, my driver's license together with $100.
That's what you do down there.
Standard. It's exactly what you do. I got back my license without the money. Standard. It's exactly what happens. So everything was going according to plan at that point. And all of a sudden, my passenger door opens, and his partner gets in, and he pulls out a gun.
Standard. What always happens, right?
And he says to me, now you're going to do whatever I tell you to do.
Oh, jeez.
And he starts giving me directions through Mexico City to parts of the city I've never been to before. And I said to myself, wow, I've got to get out of this mess.
Are you drunk at this point? Did you have any kind?
No. And I managed to steer the car very close to the Four Seasons Hotel. And I made a snap decision, and I drove the car into the front entrance of the hotel. I didn't have to ram it, no, but I kind of like slid and stopped in front of the door. I opened the door and I ran inside.
Jeez.
Okay.
Saved your life.
Unbelievable. He gets out of the car. His partner, by the way, was following us. He gets into the patrol car behind us and he disappears. At that point, he knew exactly where I lived because he'd been rifling through the papers in my car, etc.
Oh, no.
So I called up my wife and I said to her, come over here right now. We spent the night there. We went back to the house the next day. And from that point on, we lived with armed guards in the house until we left.
Wow. Did that accelerate you wanting to leave?
No, the plan was already there.
It was already there.
It was already there. It was already there.
So you can't leave your guard down is the takeaway here. You let the guard go and that's insane.
Yeah.
So you moved now to New York.
So now I moved to New York.
Where carjackings are still common. It's not.
So I moved to New York and I found myself not quite on Madison Avenue, I was on 3rd Avenue.
Yep.
But figuratively, it was Madison Avenue at the head office of McCann-Erickson Worldwide.
Wow.
And my position was Executive Vice President, Global Director of Client Services, and my specific responsibility was running the Coca-Cola business worldwide.
Jeez, you don't get bigger than that.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. So I spent my time between New York, Atlanta, and the rest of the world.
Right.
Traveled like crazy. It was unbelievable, which I loved doing. So it was fine. Yeah. It was absolutely fine. Yeah, that was incredible. Great. It was amazing.
So while you're there, you had shifted careers, right, to another agency?
Yeah, that happened afterwards. So I spent quite a few years at McCann-Erickson, running the Coke business. And my client, by the way, is a guy called Sergio Zeman, the very famous Sergio Zeman, who we used to call the Ayacola. He was a very difficult guy. Very difficult guy.
And you had to work with him.
Yeah. But he was great. Very smart man. Very smart man. He's the guy, by the way, who launched New Coke. Okay. If you recall the story, which was a disaster.
Wait, refresh us on this.
What he did was Pepsi had started something called the Pepsi Challenge, which was a taste test against Coke because they discovered in research that people actually prefer the taste of Pepsi. Sergio's response to this was to launch a product called New Coke, which, if you think about it, is an admission that Coke needs to be renewed. In other words, it's supporting Pepsi's claim. Okay. Right. So that didn't go too well. So that was pulled off the market. New Coke was not a success. And he was retained as marketing officer, chief marketing officer.
Oh, wow.
He was a smart guy, though. That was a big mistake, but he was a smart guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Madison Avenue ad agencies, if people don't know the industry, like if you've seen What Women Want, right? It's kind of that world, right? Remember that, or Mad Men? Like it's just, it's a very cutthroat on even winning the accounts, what you have to do. It is. Like, has that made you, like, that must have changed you, right? Having to deal in there and then having your work just axed, go back to the table. Like you have to have thick skin to be in the space.
You've either got to have a thick skin or you've got to have, it's a thick skin or it's a set of skills which are working.
Right.
Okay. I didn't feel the need for a thick skin, frankly, because I think at that point, my experience was such that I had figured out my own way of working within the ad business. And it was working.
It was working. Obviously, it was working. Yeah.
It was working. Because I was not your typical advertising agency management person. I was very much involved in the product of the agency. Right?
Gotcha.
Through strategy, always culminating in a powerful idea. That's what I've really always been about.
And still to this day with FelixBNI,
very much. That's what that's my focus.
Right.
That's my focus. And I also believe that there are not multiple solutions to an issue. There is a solution. There is a very good solution. And it's incumbent on us to be looking for that solution and not with alternatives that the client will readily buy. Okay? Let's look for the solution. And that's always been my focus.
Yeah. Well, what you do is you get people emotionally tied, right? With a brand. It's not about the product. It's not about Apple. It's not about the computer, which is just a great segue to talk about Apple, the Think Different campaign. Anyone who knows Apple knows of the Think Different campaign. It just changed the world, right? It was iconic at the time. You were part of the creative team.
Not the creative team. I was part of the management team.
The management team, right.
But working in the way that I work.
Yes.
Okay. Not the creative team. The creative team was led by a guy called Lee Clow, which was located in our office in Los Angeles. I was in New York. I was the global head of client service, and Lee was the worldwide creative director based in Los Angeles. And he's the guy who led the creative team.
The creative team. So being a part of that whole movement, you interacted with Steve Jobs?
Yes. Yes. In fact, my first interaction with Steve Jobs was to convince him that he should be working with TBWA globally.
Jeez. Did he see the value? Because this guy, he was a visionary with products. Did he see the value? He was a marketer himself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So how was it even pitching to him or getting him to...
My pitch to Steve, because Steve came to TBWA because of Lee Clow. Lee Clow is the guy who did that very iconic commercial for Apple called 1984.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah, okay.
That's famous piece of advertising. Yep. That was done by Lee. And as soon as Steve Jobs went back to Apple, his mind went to Lee Clow as the guy that he'd want to work with on the relaunch of Apple.
Gotcha.
Okay. So my first contact with Steve was to reassure Steve and to convince Steve that TBWA was an agency, a global agency, with the right kind of credentials to support a relaunch of Apple globally. Okay.
Yep.
And that was the job that I needed to perform. But there was already a very good connection.
Sure.
With Lee. So I didn't have to sell Steve. I had to reassure Steve.
Reassure.
Yeah.
And to do it globally across cultures.
Correct.
That's incredible.
Which is exactly what we did.
Yes.
I think the big lesson out of Apple, and it's something that I live with today very much, is that brand is not so much what you say about yourself. Brand is your ethos, who you fundamentally are. The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do, is a statement of ethos. It's not a selling line.
Right.
It's a statement of ethos, right? Think different.
It wasn't even about computers.
No.
Right.
It was about thinking differently. The word computer was not used once in the entire commercial. That commercial was all about establishing a way of looking at the world. Okay. Think different.
Think different.
And if you think of the people that it showed, I mean, from John Lennon to Einstein to Maria Callas, it was all about genius.
Yes. Good Greek influence there too, right? To get her in there.
Maria Callas. Well, there was a Greek called me, and there was another Greek called Bill Tragos, who's one of the founders of TBWA.
Okay. So, I mean, slam dunk right there. So talk to me now. When you see marketing today, and we have these, AI tools and ChatGPT, and people think that I created a logo and now that's my marketing. And there's so many points to just cringe at what you see, right? Yeah. And I know, I'm in lighting right now. So when I walk into a room, I look at lights and I'm already judging and how would I do things differently? I'm sure you do that on the daily, right? Anytime you come across stuff. What's that influence on digital, AI? Yeah. How is that changing your methodology and how you approach stuff?
Yeah. Well, I got a general point of view about AI. And that is that, let me step back. Technology is about how stuff works. Anthropology is about how people work, right? We need techno-anthropology, which is about how stuff works for people, okay? And that takes me to my point on AI. I believe that AI should be there to do stuff that we don't need to do, to enable us to do more of what only we can do, okay? And I think that is where technology should be a facilitator and not a replacement of human creativity, because it can't replace it, in my opinion.
Clip that right there, because that's incredible. So if you use it right, it helps you. So you're not doing it. Absolutely.
Yes. It allows you to do more of what only you can do.
Yes.
And this, to me, is the magic.
Absolutely.
Of technology. All right. I think it's a big mistake to expect AI to discover the ethos of a brand. Forget about it.
All right.
Forget about it. But it can do lots of stuff in implementing that and making that happen. That's another story.
Yeah. That's a big deal. Well, think of it. So now FelixBNI is, you've worked with all these major global agencies. You step back into your entrepreneurial roots with your family and your father, right? And even though you're creative and you have the strategy, you're running your own business now, right? So how do you go and find new clients? Because I'm sure you're turning away clients, right? You're not out there advertising Peter. And then over the years, like you're working with major global brands. on your own with Heineken and that yacht company and the Scandinavia, and just being able to embody and get into their company. How do you manage it being a one person type operation?
Well, first of all, I don't think that FelixBNI is that much entrepreneurial, as it was, in my view, far more of my return to what I fundamentally love about what I do.
Okay.
Which was to focus on strategy, culminating in a creative idea. Okay, because what I discovered was that the higher I climbed up in the corporate world, the more distant I was from what I truly love about the business.
Right.
Okay. What I truly love about the business. And that's why I really steered myself towards doing FelixBNI. I've been very fortunate in that I've never really found the need, touch wood, to be looking for clients. I've had a steady, big enough stream of people knocking on my door. I've been very fortunate in that way.
You've put yourself in that position, right? And after decades in this space, speaking engagements, right? You've become a public speaker.
Yeah.
So how is that? Do you do that more from a personal branding? Obviously, people want to hear what you have to say. Just how is that process?
I just love talking to groups of people. I really enjoy it.
Right.
Particularly the young people. I really, really enjoy it.
Why? Well, why young?
Because when I'm talking to a room full of people and I can see them truly listening, truly being impacted, and then coming up with questions which are truly focused in a particular direction, it gives me a great deal of satisfaction, frankly, that I'm passing something on to somebody else.
Absolutely. And I've seen your presentations online. I've been in it. What you use, the way you use even the screen behind you is so powerful. It's imagery, right? Like curated and few words. Yeah. Sometimes like a single word.
Yeah, they're billboards.
They're billboards. But like you could tell just the thought that goes into it and how it's impactful, and it resonates.
Yeah, no, they're billboards. I believe that putting words up on a screen is, forget about it.
Right.
Forget about it. You need to put a thought up on the screen, which captures the essence of a lot of stuff. Okay.
Absolutely. When you're talking to youth and young people come up to you, what are some do's and don'ts, right? Anyone that can get time with someone like you want to be respectful of the other person's time, right? But what are some things? Don't do this if you're trying to come to me. Like, people, hey, Pete, can you do this, this, and this for me? And it's like, whoa, pump the brakes, right? But what are some pieces of advice? Because you see a lot of people always trying to get something from someone.
Yeah. My single bit of advice would be, if you don't really have a question, don't ask it. If you don't really have a point of view, don't express it. Seriously. But if you've got a question, please ask it. And if you've got a point of view on something, please express it. But don't just talk for the sake of talking, for God's sake.
To show that,
that doesn't work.
That's great.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in the youth right now, like future marketers who want to have a career like Peter? What is that advice to get in the space? Because it's shifted over the years, right, on what it is.
Yeah. Well, my first and I think most important bit of advice is be sure that you are passionate about it. I think being passionate about particularly this kind of work is terribly important. I find that my work is not really work. I find that when I'm working on a project, what I need to do is fill my mind up with information around the project and just let it brew. Okay? Because invariably the answers pop up.
Right.
Okay? And then I run to a computer to capture them. Okay? And sometimes they come in the middle of the night.
Exactly.
But I find that's the process with which I work. And that can only come if you are passionately involved in what you're doing. It's not going to come otherwise. Right. It's not going to happen. If this becomes a 9 to 5 kind of thing, forget about it. Doesn't work like that. My girlfriend, Maria, often says to me that I'm always working, but on the other hand, I'm never working. And I think she's right. It's
a great way. Shout out Maria. Amazing person too. Yeah. But you're always working because again, even if you're having dinner and you're thinking about something, I get the little experience I have with you, when I'm like, oh, he's on a tangent. His mind is already.
Yeah. But it's not so much that I'm thinking of something, but something is floating around inside me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And if it connects with something else, I will quickly try to grab that.
Yes. How are you integrating like social media? Like this is a whole different platform of marketing. You're seeing a lot of people, I see it too in my space of like, oh, I'm a professional marketer, and they just post on Instagram or TikTok or whatever with no strategy, with nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's different. It's fickle.
Yeah. 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 Look, I've got a point of view about what marketing and what branding is all about. It's the sum of what you do and what you don't do and what you say and what you don't say. And if you think about the power of social media, it's a big part of who you are through what you express. Okay. At the end of the day, brand is not what you say about yourself. It's what others say about you. And they are influenced by all those little posts that you might do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So without strategy, and I wouldn't even call it strategy, without a clear sense of who you are, you need to be very cautious.
Right.
Very, very cautious. It's not about clever posts. It's about a true, honest expression of who you fundamentally are.
And setting
and
that
there's a big difference.
Yeah.
So if you don't know who you are, find out before you post.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I personally struggle in our company with identity. Yeah. Right? It's great. You win accounts, you pay bills, you do that, but then you shift and you constantly want to know, like, who are we? What are we trying to do? What is that emotion? I find in our world, we're not making emotional connections. Personally, I may have a good relationship with someone who makes the buying decisions. And they're like, you know what? He's good. His business partner's good. They're always there. But are we really making emotional connections? Yeah. And I know it. Like, I guess the positive with me is I'm cognizant, and I know that I don't think I'm making those emotional connections with my company's brand. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And at least I know that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what complicates that is that it's not just what you express. It's what everybody working inside your company expresses. And the second point about brand is once you know who you are, make sure that that's expressed as a culture that everybody inside the company subscribes to. Everybody. And that's very much where my work is focused, is on getting that fundamental ethos right, developing a narrative around that, and then building a culture that everybody understands within the company. Because once you get that, they can then express it with what they do.
Okay. So how, when you're creating this ethos, this messaging, this who we are, how do you go from then deploying that to the team? Because everyone will say, we have the best company culture. We're this, we're that.
Yeah.
90% of it's bullshit. Yeah. Right? You really don't. But how do you sit there and how do you deploy that? I'm just curious.
Yeah. Okay. So what I do is the following. I always start with one-on-one interviews with the people who truly shape the future of the company. Okay. The CEO, the senior leadership team, possibly the board of directors, possibly some of the owners, right? To make sure that I'm truly understanding the ethos. Okay. And these are individual, one-on-one, in-depth interviews where I'm listening. Okay. What I then do is I deconstruct that stuff, reconstruct it, and look for the essence of what it's all about. The next step is going one level lower into the organization and doing workshops with people, which has got a dual function. Number one, it checks that against what other people are feeling, but it's also a way of disseminating that, okay, within opinion leaders within the organization, which allows your culture to start spreading. And it's terribly important to do that. Because if it's just something coming from top management,
you're talking at them.
It's not worth much. Everybody's going to feel it. They will say, yes, that's who we are. That's who we are.
That's so powerful. And you've done this repeatedly. And here's the thing, across industries. Yeah. You're industry agnostic.
Correct.
Right? And cultures. Yeah. You're working with the Dutch and then the Germans and then here. Yeah. So obviously your methodology works. Yeah. Right?
But for it to work across cultures, it's got to be universally relevant. And that's another point. A good brand must have universal relevance.
But that's on you. So when you're there, you're creating that relevance.
Yeah.
And then you need ownership, senior team to bite off on it, right? That's a lot of moving parts to align.
But you've got to be relevant to humanity, not to a subgroup of humanity. You've got to be expressing fundamental human truths. I did work, for example, for a medical company where I spoke about true care. I said there's care and there's true care. True care is for body, mind, and soul, not just for the body. Okay? Mm-hmm. And this became a culture inside this organization, a very powerful culture.
So emphasizing more on mental health and...
Well, not just on mental health, but on making sure that we're looking after the patient holistically. And this came to me because I was in a clinic. They do kidney dialysis, by the way. I was in a clinic where there were patients tied up to machines, busy doing dialysis on their bodies. And I saw a nurse walk up to a patient and touch the patient's hand like this. And a huge smile broke out on the patient's face. And I said, that's true care.
Just that little tap.
That little touch. By the way, it gets me back to what I was saying earlier about technology. Let technology take care of the body. This is what we need to do. And only humans can do that.
Only humans.
AI can't do that.
Yeah. Cold metal, doing that across your hand, you're not going to get that.
Can't do it.
That's amazing.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet. I want to talk about your philanthropy. Make-A-Wish Foundation, right? You've been, your title?
I was chairman of the board internationally.
Internationally. So you do a lot of stuff. I'm sure you're getting pulled in a lot of directions, or they try to pull you.
Well, I'm no longer involved with Make-A-Wish. I was there for, 7 years. So I became chair of the board, which was amazing. It's a phenomenal organization. But beyond Make-A-Wish, I'm involved with quite a few philanthropic causes. One of these is the Orchidee Foundation in Washington, which is in honor of the Greek Orchi, the famous Greek Orchi, when they said no to the Germans back during the Second World War. Yeah. I think philanthropy is something the world needs it, for God's sake.
And if you have a voice and an influence and a following.
Yeah. I think that we should be expressing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to do a couple rapid fire questions for you.
Sure, go ahead.
Because I know you've been amazing with your time. I know we have like a few more minutes here. If you could rebrand anything today, like if you got to pick something that it's not even about money or business, something that you could rebrand that just maybe drives you nuts, or you think, that's iconic.
I want to think about that. I want to think about that.
We're going to come back to that. What's your routine with brainstorming? So you had mentioned earlier, you get up during the night. If you have an idea, you go to your laptop, your computer. But when you're sitting there and diving into something new, where do you go and draw inspiration? Is it physically your space at home? Do you need to come out here? Do you need to fly? Are you caffeine? Like, what is it that gets you into that zone where you're just like, man, I'm rocking on all cylinders?
It's all of that stuff put together.
Okay.
It's just living my life. Okay. I love traveling. I love good restaurants. I love walking on the beach. I love all that stuff. Absolutely. I love being on the boat, right? All of that stuff I love. And this is what stimulates my thinking. All the stuff I love doing.
It's all doing that. Living in Greece, that kind of brings it all together.
That's all about it too. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, even 3 months ago, we're grabbing dinner, beautiful view of the Acropolis.
Yeah.
And you, who's been living here so long, have seen that millions of times.
Yeah.
You're sitting there in awe, taking photos of the Acropolis with the sunset.
Yeah. Right? It was amazing.
It was amazing, but
it's amazing.
It's just cool seeing that on how much you still, and it's not the same. Like, I know people that live here in Athens, and they stop and they admire it, right? It's just, it's a different world here, right?
Yeah. It's what I love about living in this country, by the way. The food, the nature, the people. I love it.
Yes.
It stimulates me.
Well, and you were saying before, so many friends want to move here that aren't even from here.
Yes.
And you've seen from the 80s, which was a whole other world back then, early 2000s, right before, we kind of peaked, and then austerity. And then you also said something that just resonated during COVID when we had met up at one point. And I'm like, how's it going for you? And I remember this resonated. You're like, no problem. We've been preparing for this for the last decade plus.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what did he mean? I'm like, like it basically from, right? I remember you saying something like that, and it's like, resilience here, right?
Yeah, it's true.
So we already talked about career advice. your routine. Here's just a fun one. Take any historical figure. If you could rebrand someone creatively, who's a historical figure that you think could use some work, again, putting you on the spot. I know you need time to think about it.
I want to think about that one too. I want to think about that one too.
Absolutely. Yep. So, and then just talking about Athens in general, what's your top restaurant? Like, I think a lot of people that want to come here, what are your top types of food here? Like, what's a happy place for Peter?
Okay, for Peter. First of all, I grew up in South Africa where we used to eat a lot of meat. Okay. And I hardly eat meat anymore because this place is just brilliant for fish.
Right.
Right. And not just for fish, but also for the Greek Mediterranean diet generally is just so beautifully balanced. Right. And I find that with Greek food, there is no real conflict with what is good for you and what is good, right? It's like taste and well-being just go together.
Right.
All right. And that's what I love about Greek cuisine, I guess. I've got many favorite types of cuisine. I love restaurants that manage to do what my grandmother used to do even better than my grandmother could do it. I love that.
Absolutely.
And there are a couple of places that come to mind where that is the case.
Should never admit that though, right? It's never better than you guess. Right?
Exactly. And I love a good fish restaurant. There's one in particular in the city which I call the best fish restaurant in the world. And it's one of the best in Athens.
Can you drop the name? Free advertising?
It's called Durambe.
Okay.
I just love it. It's superb.
You got to put that on my list.
I love it. And my other favorite, which is my grandmother's kind of cuisine, is a place called Papadakis. Do you know Papadakis?
You've taken me there.
There you go.
Yeah. The chef.
Love
who's
it.
the chef?
Barbariga.
Yeah.
Argiro.
Up in Kolonaki, up towards. Yeah. That was a great dinner there.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
What are you seeing in Athens right now? All these international brands are coming, luxury hotels. Everyone's coming here. Athens, you can't even rent a monthly apartment. Yeah. Everything's Airbnb. Yeah. There's so much money coming here.
Yeah. There's
positive and negative to it. So let's talk about the positives. Why is that good?
I think it's very, very good because I've always said that Athens, Greece, can and should be the west coast of Europe. Okay. And I think that I see signs of that happening. Athens is attracting people, but it's also attracting investment. It's also attracting some of the world's best hotels. It's doing all sorts of wonderful stuff. And I really think that Athens, Greece is poised to really carve out a new kind of future for itself. And I can see the evidence of that all over the place. Probably the most important part of that is this mindset shift that we were talking about earlier. There's been a significant mindset shift amongst the new generation, which is now moving to positions of power in business. Okay. And that mindset shift is all about creativity. It's all about doing stuff from scratch. It's about getting stuff done. It's about Ginetai.
Yep.
And it's amazing that that's happening. Okay. It's amazing. And I think that's being reflected in so many things.
Absolutely.
In this city. So many things.
When Ginetai, just coming back to that, when you came up with that, it was known, everyone talks about it. Some people embodied it, the ones that maybe matter, that can cause influence. But from a government standpoint, did you ever hear any backlash or feedback or what's this guy talking about?
No, on the contrary. I found a lot of politicians embraced it. I had meetings with many, many politicians at that time. And they embraced it. They embraced it very readily, very, very readily. And I think that it's part of what's been happening in this country has been government expressing a lot of that kind of thinking over the past few years, which I think is a very positive thing.
Things are changing.
Things are changing.
But
there is a negative side.
Okay.
And I think the negative side is, number one, things in the city are becoming expensive, in certain areas especially.
And quickly.
Yeah. Which means that those whose incomes are not being affected by this shift in what's happening, or not being affected in the short term, are suffering. I get it. And I think that's something that we need to be very aware of and pay attention to. And the second thing the more people that Athens attracts, both as tourists and as permanent residents here, we've got issues with the infrastructure.
Absolutely.
For example, getting from home in Vula to the city is a nightmare. It's a nightmare. We need to be aware of these negative aspects and make sure that we deal with them.
So how do you, again, you're not a politician, but you know these people, right? You have influence. How do you fix it? Is it as simple as, all right, minimum wage is going up to X, and then now we're causing hyperinflation across the board? When I vacation here in the summers, and I've said this several times on different episodes, for a few days, we'll maybe go to a resort, right? Because there's pools and whatever.
Yeah.
And where the pricing was this past summer, the highest it's ever been. Yeah. And I see not 3, 4, 5%. It's like 15% more, 15% more. And I talk, and I have friends that work at resorts, and they're the waiters and servers and bar staff. And I love talking with them. It's like, what are you making all in every month? Right. And that's not increasing by 10, 15%. No. And resentment, I feel, grows.
Absolutely.
And it's no different than, Americans or Canadians vacationing in Cuba or Dominican, and you're spending and they're making dollars a day. So I feel like that's happening here.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right.
And what's the solution, though?
Well, I think that we've got to be terribly aware of that problem and make sure that there are multiple solutions addressing those issues. There must be. And I'm not sure what the answers are.
Right.
But if we're aware of them, then we can deal with them. I think there's another issue in Greece which is terribly important. For quite a few years, there has not been effective opposition. And I'm talking about political opposition, which I think is terribly important, which means that those who are feeling the negative effects of the positive stuff that is happening, right, don't feel that they have a voice representing them. And that's very, very unfortunate.
Yes.
Because I think it's important that government has got diversity inside it. And right now, we don't have that.
Has Greece ever had that? I know, and again, this is someone from the outside.
Yeah.
Every party, it's like a rebranding is what I see. Yeah. Again, we're from the outside, so we don't live it day to day. And I know some of the local listeners will be like, well, you don't get it, so you can't comment. Fine, fair point. But you have this leader of this current administration who's got a great image outside of the country. Everyone who knows of this prime minister, he's doing a good job. He speaks well, he presents well. So we assume he's a great leader. I don't know. So I fall in that category. Yeah. Then the other opposition's like, well, let's put this guy, and they just recycle back and forth. So from the outside looking in, it seems like there's really no challenge to it. What are your thoughts and opinions of someone from the outside coming in and possibly taking a run at it who's not connected in these parties?
Yeah. Why not is my immediate answer to that. I think what we're looking for is relevance to the position that the country is in at this point in time. And if that relevance comes in the way that you were suggesting, absolutely, why not?
Right.
Absolutely, why not? But I think what it does need is alternative voices, diversity in the expression at the top. Yeah. I think it's terribly important.
Absolutely.
Terribly important.
So are you going to throw your hat in the ring?
No.
And right now, way too many skeletons on the closet.
No.
Yeah. It's amazing. But coming here, and then the other side is it is becoming a global hub. Even for my operations here, we're servicing Europe and being able to do it here, and the talent.
That's terrific. Congratulations.
It's exciting. Thank you. But the other side is you challenge, part of the DNA here too is it's always been, it's just breaking the Ginetai. And sometimes you don't even have to say those two words, the Ginetai. Sometimes it's just like you see it on their face.
Yes.
With just stuff. And it's like, let's just shift that.
Yes.
The other night when I landed here, we went for dinner and drinks with a bunch of random people. And I was just inviting some clients. You weren't available, all this stuff, and partners. And there's a guy that moved in from Chicago and this guy from Las Vegas. And it was this group with other Greeks. And the energy was just cool. People are moving here. It was just a very collaborative type thing. And I'm hoping that also is influencing the younger people to say, hey, you know what? There's opportunities. On the flip side, if you're growing up here and you see that system and there's no change, it's a tough system to want to excel.
Absolutely.
So
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I think that, giving people the sense of Ginetai, it's not just expressing it. It's about once somebody is saying Ginetai, let's help them. Let's assist them to make it happen. Right?
Absolutely.
And it doesn't mean with handouts. That's not what I'm talking about. Let's make sure we've got the kind of society that is willing to support that kind of spirit.
Totally.
I think it's terribly important.
Absolutely.
Terribly important.
Two last things that I would love to cover, because I'm one of those things. I'm coming back to those historical figures. If there's someone that needs some rebranding, I'm putting it. And it's okay. We can do it on a future episode.
Okay.
But I've always been curious. What was it like growing up? You said you studied in Cape Town. You went to university. What was that culturally, racial divide? Because you're a man of the world. You've lived in all cultures. You know, you see just a human. But what was that world like? Because people don't get it. I don't even get it.
Yeah. South Africa, when I think back on the world that I grew up in, it was a weird world. It was a world where there was public transport reserved for people with white skins and public transport reserved for people with black skins, for example. Which, if you think about it, that's just an absurd idea.
Insane.
Totally insane. And not just transport. Everything in that society was like that. Blacks didn't vote. And I'm talking about a society where there were, if I'm not mistaken, South Africa's population at the time was 40 million. 36 million didn't vote.
Come on. It was that big of a percent.
Oh, yes. It was true colonialism, which had survived from the 17th century, for God's sake.
Jeez.
So it was a weird kind of place to live in. But I grew up in a family where, I must say, my family I can't recall at all within my family an expression of superiority or of racial divide and that kind of thing. I can't recall it as a kid.
From your family outwards, like just acting.
Yeah. Or within the family, discussions we'd have. It never, ever touched those issues.
Well, I'm sure it didn't, because your family came from another part of the world and you're trying to assimilate, right?
And my family they were refugees from the period of when the Turks took over the island that they used to live on.
So your grandparents?
Oh, yes. My grandparents emigrated. So I was actually a third generation South African. Okay.
Wow.
I was just a South African with a funny name.
Right.
By the way, I remember when I was in the South African Army compulsory service down there, when it came down to roll call, when they came to the name Economides on the roll calls, it would be silence. I'd say, yeah, here I am.
Smith, Jones.
Yeah, here I am. It was funny. So, yeah, it was a strange place.
How was it from the outside in, though? Like, was there resentment?
What do you mean?
Meaning from the 36 million to the 4, were the 4 million treated differently because?
Well, there was. I mean, if you think about it, Nelson Mandela used to be the head of a party. The party still existed. They're not used to be head of the party. The party called the ANC, the African National Congress, was regarded in South Africa at some point as a terrorist organization.
Wow.
There was sporadic violence in that country from time to time. On both sides, there would be violence from whites towards blacks, but there'd also be black uprisings here and there. Okay, so there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. It was a place of conflict,
right?
Of institutionalized almost conflict.
Couldn't imagine.
Yeah, it was something else. It was something else. And here we're talking about just 30 years ago?
Yeah.
40 years ago? It's unbelievable.
Well, the reason why I asked, because you were saying you went to a documentary premiere last night.
Yeah.
Worth mentioning?
Absolutely. Yeah. The legendary George Bezos. George Bezos, Greek South African, born in Greece, Koroni, emigrated to South Africa, I believe in the 40s, if I remember correctly. And he became an activist lawyer, and he eventually became Nelson Mandela's attorney. Remarkable guy. Absolutely remarkable guy. Absolutely. I mean, talk about that Greek spirit of Orchi. I mentioned the Orchidea Foundation earlier. George Bezos encompasses that 100%. 100%. Remarkable guy. So there was also at the same time that kind of thing going on. And George Bezos was not on his own. There were a lot of people who were, he was very significant, but he was not on his own. There were a lot of people expressing that kind of objection to the system as it existed.
Yeah. I can't wait till that comes out, hopefully mainstream, to be able to see that.
Yeah, no, it will be. It will be.
Amazing. Peter, in closing, what's Peter Economides working on now in the future? Anything? coming up that the listeners, we're going to share all your links so people could get in contact. Please spam him, ask him for his free time. Don't do that. But we'll share all that stuff. But what's on the horizon for you?
Yeah, I need to be. I don't want to disclose any confidential information, but I've got a couple of projects on the go right now. Some of them outside of Greece, but also a couple of them inside Greece. And there's something which I'm personally involved with, which I'm very excited about. I think I've told you about this. It is the renovation, the reconstruction of this incredible building in downtown Athens called the Arsakio Megaro, the Arsaki Mansion, which is a beautiful building.
Can you spell Arsaki just so we...
Arsaki. Arsaki.
Arsaki, okay.
Arsaki. This building designed by the German architect Schiller, neoclassical building built in 1803, if I'm not mistaken. This is an entire city block in the middle of Athens. We are renovating this and turning it into a food hall dedicated to the Greek Mediterranean diet. It's going to be delicious.
Insane.
Absolutely delicious. Jeez. So it'll be a bit about being able to buy special produce produced by Greece's top, not necessarily well-known producers, small producers. The best chefs in Greece, wine tastings, cooking lessons, food tastings, all sorts of wonderful stuff.
Sounds magical.
It's going to be amazing.
So an Italy Greek version.
An Italy Greek version.
Yeah. So this sounds like international play once up and running.
Absolutely. That's the whole idea.
That's exciting. Can you share what the brand is going to be, what it's going to be called?
It's called Stoa.
Stoa.
Stoa in Greek means arcade.
Yes.
And I've written a narrative about this. An arcade is what connects people. Okay. It connects the past with the present, right? It connects traditional Greek cooking with contemporary. It connects Greece with the world, etc., etc., etc. So it's called Stoa.
That's going to be amazing. When are we opening?
We're opening in, hopefully, by the time that summer comes around in 2025.
That's exciting.
It's going to be very exciting.
If you don't have lighting hooked up, I'm going to hook you up with the lighting. Let me be your international guy. That's exciting. And we're going to share, there's some articles online. So I want to put that up there as well. That's exciting.
Yeah.
And you're curating, the messaging, you're part of this. Like that's a big deal.
I'm a shareholder in this, but I'm also doing the messaging and stuff, yes.
Incredible.
And the branding.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I appreciate you sitting down.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so
2
much
years
for
in the
having
making.
me.
Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're awesome.
Thank you.
And we're going to come back to the historical figure on a future episode.
You don't let me go.
I'm not going to let you go on that. Put you on the spot, man.
By the way,
tell me.
Aristotle is one of my ancient heroes. If I think of anybody who cracked branding, it's Aristotle. He spoke about ethos, about who you fundamentally are, okay, as being a very, very important component in rhetoric. He spoke about logo, which is what you say. He spoke about pathos, which is the reaction you evoke. But he said ethos is at the center of it, who you fundamentally are. That's what brand's all about. Aristotle spoke about it.
Jeez. I mean, there you go. Call that a wrap. That was amazing. So that's the guy.
That's the guy. He spoke about something else, by the way. There's a fourth component, which people very seldom remember, called kairos, which means timeliness. You got to do things at the right time.
At the right time. Wow.
Amazing.
That's amazing. Well, there you go. That's our inspiration right there. Jeez. Have you been to the Socrates prison cell here? Have you ever?
No.
Someone was just there, and all the years I've been here, and it's just right at our feet. Got to check that out.
Yeah, I must. Amazing.
Peter, you're amazing, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
This was so good.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Invigorate Your Business with George Stroumboulis. Please hit the subscribe and like buttons and follow me on all the main podcast streaming channels. Also, please share your comments when you can. I appreciate your help in expanding this network to a worldwide audience. Until next time, stay invigorated.